Yeah.
Good evening, students. I welcome you all on behalf of Indian Medical College to this online class. Dear viewers, in today's session, we have a great speaker, our beloved Dr. Syed Irfan Ali sir, who is an associate professor from the Department of Community Medicine from Great Eastern Medical School with us. He has several years of teaching experience in his field, and sir will be taking a class on the topic Assess of Nutritional Status today. Good evening, and I welcome you, sir. It is an immense pleasure to have you here with us. And dear viewers, if you have any doubts or clarification, you can type them in the comment section below, and your queries will be clarified by our doctor at the end of the session. Sir, you can start the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kavya. Okay, good evening, everyone. Today I will be dealing with this important topic about assessment of nutritional status. This is one of the most frequently asked question in our university exam. And the question pattern will be like this. They will be asking either a long question of 10 marks or short question of 4 marks is with these type of questions. And accordingly, I will be dealing with these questions today. I will start with nutritional surveillance. Then I will go on to enumerate the various methods by which you can carry out a nutritional surveillance. After which we will go into detail about the techniques used and briefly discuss and two very important I think the screen. Okay, after that, I'm going to enumerate the various methods used in the nutritional status. Then we are going to discuss the various techniques used. And then at the end, I will be dealing in depth with the two very important methods, which are anthropometric measures and the diet survey methods. So let's start with the nutritional surveillance. What do you mean by nutritional surveillance? And more importantly, what are the aims of nutritional surveillance? Like any other survey, it has a fourfold aims. First is to identify if there is a problem. And indeed, if there is a problem, then define the problem in terms of the magnitude and its distribution. Magnitude, since malnutrition is a chronic problem, so we express the magnitude of the problem in terms of prevalence, and the distribution of the problem in terms of place and person. So person means who are at risk of developing this problem, and place means which areas this problem is more commonly found. After finding everything about the problem, the next third step is about planning for a solution. You either find solutions to the problem and implement it in form of a program, or you intervene for the problem. And the final step is that now that you have implemented the program, is this program working or not? That is done by monitoring and evaluation. So right from the start of finding the problem till monitoring and evaluating the solution of the problem, all these steps are the aims of nutritional survey. So how is it done? The first step of doing a nutritional survey is to identify the community in which you are going to carry out a nutritional surveillance. The second step is start collecting data. Now, ideally, as far as collecting of the data is concerned, ideally you should collect it from the entire community. But every one of us know that it's not possible. So for example, if I ask you what is the nutritional status of India, it's not possible for us to collect data from all the 133 crore Indians, right? So what we do instead is we take sampling. We take a shortcut. We take sampling. So in this sampling, we have to make sure that the sample is representative of the general population. So what do you mean by representative sample? It simply means that all the major age groups, both the sexes, and all the subgroups existing in the population. So for example, caste, okay, religions, they are all represented in the sample. For our results to be valid, the sample has to be representative. So that's the second step. The third step is about data collection. How are you going to collect the data? Well, there are various methods. just now we can say that there are direct methods and indirect methods of collecting the data. I'm going to enumerate these methods in detail later on. After collecting the data, the next step is you have to interpret the data. As I said, the aim of nutritional surveillance, interpretation of the data will tell you that is there a problem, and if yes, there is a problem, then what is the magnitude of the problem, that is the prevalence of the problem, and what is the distribution of the problem in terms of place and person. So who are the at-risk population, who are at risk of this developing this problem, and why are they at risk? So these things are the answer to these questions are obtained from interpretation of the data collected. The next step is finding solutions. You either intervene or you directly plan a program. So you put all your solutions in form of a program and implement the program. And then finally, is that program working or not? That is where monitoring and evaluation comes in. So nutritional surveillance consists of this cycle. As I said, there are various methods for doing a nutritional surveillance, and I told you briefly that there are direct methods and indirect methods. These methods can also be remembered as an abbreviation or a mnemonic of ABCDEF followed by V. So A is for anthropometry, B is for biochemical test, C is for clinical examination, D is for diet survey, E is for ecological factors, F is for functional indicators. We also have a V here, and V is for vital statistics. The decision about which method to be employed in a nutritional surveillance should be done before carrying out this nutritional surveillance. So we come to the second question of our topic, which is what are the various methods, enumerate the various methods for doing assessing the nutritional status. So as I said, they are divided into two types, direct method and indirect method. In the direct methods, we are directly assessing the nutritional status of the person. The data obtained by us is telling whether this person's nutritional status is adequate or inadequate. Now these methods are A, B, C, D, and F. I already told you what are A, B, C, D, and F. So let's come to the most important direct method, which is anthropometry measures. Anthro means human being or man, and pometry means measure. So anthropometry basically means you are measuring a man. So anthropometry differs from children and adults. We use different measures for children and we use different measures for adults. We will start with describing in detail the anthropometric measures which we use for the adults. Now, the most important measure for anthropometry in case of adults is body mass index, abbreviated as BMI. It's a simple calculation where you take the weight of the person in kgs and you divide that with the height of the person in meters square. So whatever value you get, you have to cross-reference that value with these tables, which is given here. If that value falls between 18.5 to 24.99, the person is said to be normal. If the value is above 30, the person is said to be obese. And if the value is above 40, is said to be morbidly obese or obesity class 3. Similarly, if this value is less than 18.5, the person is said to be underweight. But however, if the value is less than 17, the person is said to have a moderate to severe thinness. Now, body mass index is a measure of body fat. Therefore, it is a good indicator, or it tells you about your risk to develop complications such as diabetes, hypertension, and cardiovascular accidents. But one of the demerit of body mass index, and especially this table, is that this is applicable only for people above 20 years of age. Because below 20 years of age, the distribution of fat varies according to age and sex, and you cannot standardize them. So what do we do in those cases? In those cases, we again calculate the BMI using the same formula, which is weight in kg by height in meter square. But then we have to compare the values for each individual's age and sex. For example, if I calculate the body mass index of a 17-year-old boy, then what I do is I compare it with the standard of a 17-year-old male person. And if whatever value I got, if it falls between say 5th to 85th percentile, then the person is said to have healthy weight. The boy is said to be healthy. However, if his BMI falls above 95th percentile, then he is said to be overweight. Similarly, if his BMI, whatever we calculated, falls to less than 5th percentile compared to his age and compared to his sex, then he is said to be an underweight person. The second most important anthropometric measure used in adults is waist and hip circumference. Both of these are calculated in standing position where the feet are pretty much close and the arms are at the side. It is calculated during the end of the respiratory cycle or during the expiration. The waist circumference is calculated midway between the highest point of the iliac crest and the bottom of the rib cage. And if it, in case of females, it should be less than 88 centimeters, and in case of males, it should be less than 102 centimeters. Similarly, hip circumference is calculated at the widest portion of the buttocks. We can use both of the circumference and form a ratio that is called waist hip ratio. And this waist hip ratio should be less than 1 in case of a male, and it should be less than 0.85 in case of females. Now again, just like BMI, waist hip ratio is an indicator of body fat, especially abdominal fat. And just like BMI, it also tells you about the future risk of developing diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, and hypertension. Another popular anthropometric measure used in adults is skin fold thickness. Now, we use a special instrument called Harpenden caliper for measuring the skin fold thickness. The skin of 4 sides are used. Those are mid-tricep, bicep, suprascapular region, and suprailiac region. Then all the measurements are added up together. All the 4 measurements are added up together. And in case of males, it should be less than 40 centimeter, while in case of female, it should be less than 50 centimeter. Again, it is an indicator of body fat, especially the subcutaneous fat, and therefore it is a marker for future development of cardiovascular disease or hypertension or diabetes mellitus. Now let's come to the anthropometrical measures used for children. The most common anthropometric measures used for children are weight for age, height for age, and weight for height. As far as weight for age is concerned, it is one of the most popular measures which we use. It tells about the short-term malnutrition or the present status of the child, right? However, if you track the weight for age of the child over a period of time, then it becomes a very sensitive indicator of change in nutritional status. If you track this and if you make a graphical representation of weight for age over a period of time, then it is called growth chart or road to health chart, which we usually use in Indian circumstances. So in India, what we do is we record this growth chart from birth till 5 years of age, and we track the weight of the child. As we know that growth chart has got 3 curves in it, and based on the chart plotted, it tells about the nutritional status of the child, whether he is doing well or whether he is not doing so well and he requires an improvement about it. Second second method for anthropometric measure is height for age of the children. If the child is less than 2 years of age, then it is called length for age of the children, and we use a special instrument called infantometer for measuring the length of the child. However, if the child is about 2 years of age and he can stand erect, then we use a special instrument called stadiometer, or even a measuring tape is enough for us. And what we measure is called height. There, what we measure was called length. Here, what we measure is called height. Height does not tell anything about the present status of the child, present nutritional status of the child. However, it is a very sensitive indicator of past nutritional status or long-term nutritional status of the child. We also have something called weight for height. Now, all these measurements, whatever you are taking, weight for age, height for age, or weight for height, are compared with the known reference standards. And if the present calculation falls less than 2 standard deviation of the reference standards, then we say that there is a problem. For example, if the height for age is less than 2 standard deviation of the reference standard, then we call the child as stunted and he is said to have chronic malnutrition. Similarly, if the child's weight for height is less than 2 standard deviation, then we say that the child is wasted, most probably because of acute malnutrition or because of acute infectious diseases. Similarly, if the child has both height for age and weight for height less than 2 standard deviation, then the child is called stunted and wasted. Also, if the weight for age is less than 2 standard deviation, we simply call the child as underweight. Other anthropometric measures used in children are head circumference, chest circumference, and mid-arm circumference. Head circumference usually becomes equal to chest circumference at 6 to 9 months. If it is not becoming equal, then it means there is some form of mental retardation. That means if the head circumference is less than chest circumference at 6 months of age, then we say that there is some form of mental retardation. Chest circumference is, as we said, it becomes equivalent to head circumference at 9 months of age. However, if it is still less than head circumference, then we say that the child is having some malnutrition. Mid-arm circumference is a very important anthropometric measure in case of children. It diagnoses protein energy malnutrition, and it is measured by means of one special colored tape called Shakir's tape. The funda behind measuring the mid-arm circumference is that children from 1 year to 5 years of age, their mid-arm circumference doesn't change. It remains constant. Okay. So if after measuring the mid-arm circumference, you found that the child's mid-arm circumference is less than 12.5 centimeter, then the child is said to have severe malnutrition. If it is anywhere between 12.5 to 13.5 centimeter, then the child is said to have mild to moderate malnutrition, and normal children have a mid-arm circumference of about 13.5 centimeters. So these are the various anthropometric measures which we are using. The advantages of anthropometric measure is it is very easy method. It can be done very easily without any technical expertise. Any non-medical person, you can train him to calculate these things. It can be done very well. If recorded over a period of time, it can reflect the pattern of growth and development. And it can also warn you if the individual is deviating from the average at various ages in body size, build, or nutritional status. But the disadvantages of anthropometry is that there will be inter-observer errors. It has limited nutritional diagnosis. The fact that it will say that, yes, the child is wasted, yes, the child is stunted, but why is the child wasted and stunted? Is it because of protein energy malnutrition? Is it because of energy malnutrition? Or is it because of zinc deficiency? That you cannot get by anthropometry. Reference standard may not match with the community. If you remember, there is something called Boston standards, which we use for weight measurement, where the reference standard were children born in Boston. Now, an American child is very much different to that of an Indian child, right? So we need to find the right reference standards to compare in case of anthropometry. So these are the various advantages and disadvantages of anthropometry. The second assessment method for nutritional status is biochemical or laboratory testing. See, what happens here is that whenever you get the disease of malnutrition, it follows similar natural history. There will be a stage of pre-pathogenesis. There will be a stage of subclinical stage where even though you have malnutrition, clinically no signs will be visible. There will be a clinical stage where clinical signs will be visible. There will be a late stage where pathogenesis has been set in, and there will be death. So, by doing clinical examination, you can identify people who are in the clinical stage. By doing biochemical examination, you can identify people from subclinical stage onwards. And by doing functional indices, you can also identify people from subclinical stage onwards. The concept behind using these things, biochemical, clinical, functional indices, is that you're actually diagnosing people who are having malnutrition, right? So let's come to biochemical or laboratory tests. Laboratory tests are of three types. One is you test the blood as in case of hemoglobin. Second is you can test the urine as in case of protein deficiency. And third is you can test the stool as in case of infestations. Biochemical tests, broadly, you can classify them into three types. The first, where the serum concentration of nutrient is calculated. Second, where abnormal excretion of a metabolite in urine is calculated. And the third, in which measurement of an enzyme which acts as a coenzyme. Measurement of the enzyme for which vitamin acts as a coenzyme is calculated. We all know that vitamin B1, tyrosine pyrophosphate, is a coenzyme for transketolase activity. Similarly, B2, riboflavin, is a coenzyme for glutathione peroxidase activity. So you just have to measure what is the enzymatic activity of these two enzymes in the RBC to know what is the level of thiamine and riboflavin. Similarly, we know that iodine is normally excreted in urine. So if you find the urinary iodine excretion level, you will know what is the nutritional status of that person, whether he has enough iodine or not. Okay. Sugar is excreted in urine. So we all know how diabetes is diagnosed, right? So excess of sugar in urine, that means he has diabetes. Similarly, protein is excreted in urine. We all know about proteinuria. So these are the various biochemical tests which we undertake to diagnose nutritional problems in the individual or community. The advantages and disadvantages of biochemical tests are that yes, it is very sensitive and specific. It is very objective in nature. There is no subjective variations here. It can identify malnutrition in the very early course of the disease. It can even identify malnutrition in the pre-pathogenesis stage. Okay, so that's how good a biochemical test is. However, the disadvantages are that it is very expensive. It requires technical expertise. It cannot be performed on a whole population. It is so expensive that you cannot do it on a whole population. You have to do it in individual levels. And it just tells you about the current state. It doesn't tell you about the past state. So those are the advantages and disadvantages of biochemical tests. The next is method of nutritional assessment is clinical examination, where you simply examine a person clinically and diagnose based on the signs and symptoms whether the person has malnutrition or not. Now, these clinical signs can be divided into three types. First is not related to nutrition. Second is needs further investigation. And third is known to be of value. See, none of these signs are specific for malnutrition. So what we do is presence of more than one clinical signs, it improves the diagnostic significance. I will give you an example. Needs further investigation. Now, corneal vascularization, this can occur because of vitamin A deficiency, but it can also occur because of infection, right? It can also occur because of an injury. So it needs further investigation, not related to nutrition. That means these things, pyuria, alopecia, pterygium, they are not signs of malnutrition. Known to be of value. Even now, they don't say that it is diagnostic of malnutrition. They simply say it is known to be of value. So bitot spot, right? Vitamin A deficiency, angular stomatitis. So these are known to be of value. But again, I'm telling you that clinical signs are not very specific. So that's the disadvantage of these tests of clinical science, that they lack specificity. They have an iceberg phenomenon which lead to missed cases. That means subclinical cases cannot be diagnosed by clinical signs and symptoms. So as malnutrition is an iceberg, as malnutrition shows iceberg phenomenon, so lots of cases will be missed if you just rely on clinical findings. They cannot quantify malnutrition, and they are again subjective in nature. So a Dr. X might see this sign, but Dr. Y may not be able to see this sign. The advantages are it is simple, practical, and it can be performed at a community level. Large number of people can be tested at one time. So those are the advantages of clinical sciences. Clinicals. Diet survey is the second most important method to assess the nutritional status after anthropometry. What do we do in diet survey is step one, we identify or we do a survey to find the food intake of the family or the community. I'll tell you about the remaining steps, but let's come to the step one, how to find the food intake of the family or community. There are three popular methods in which we can do. You can weigh the raw food here. What do we do here is before the food is cooked, we measure the weight of the food which is being cooked. After that, how much food is taken, how much food is wasted, right? Now this thing has to be done at the household level for about 1 to 21 days. If done properly, it is fairly acceptable. It is also practical and it is accurate also. Second method is weighing in cooked food. So what you do here is you weigh the food after it is cooked. Now, in theory, it is right, but practically it is not possible, right? You cannot go into someone's house and weigh their cooked food. Raw food, they might give it to you for weighing, but cooked food, no one is going to give it to you. So it's not practical, and obviously it is not acceptable also. Third way is a simpler way. It is a recall questionnaire. So 24 or 48-hour recall questionnaire, we call it. Information is collected about what food the persons in the household have consumed for the past 2 days or past day. And the advantage of this method is that large amount of data can be collected over a short period of time. And besides what food they are taking, additional information like dietary habits and practices can also be collected by this method. So steps about collecting information about the food consumption. Then what you do is you divide those food groups into pulses, cereals, milk, various food groups. Step 2 is calculate the nutritive value of the food. So now what you do, food which they are consuming is converted into various nutrients. We have a textbook by ICMR called Nutritive Value of Indian Foods, which help you to convert it. So I'm just giving you an example here. So perhaps suppose the person has taken something, say sorghum, okay? That's the food which he has consumed. You can convert them into nutrient, how much protein, how much fat, how much iron. So that is your step 2, right? To convert whatever food the person has consumed into various nutrients. Then you calculate the mean nutrient intake for a standard or for an average adult man or one consumption unit. Okay. After that, you compare it with the nutritional requirement of the person. Cross match each nutrient with its recommended dietary allowance. See that whether the nutrient is being taken in sufficient amount, or is there any excess, or is there any deficiency of that nutrition consumption. And then according to that, you prescribe the person the right amount of diet. So that was about dietary assessment. Then let's come to the indirect methods of assessing the nutrition. These indirect Okay, functional indicators, sorry for that. Functional indicators is also a direct method of assessing the nutritional assessment. Some nutrients are important for carrying out some core functions of the body. In absence of these nutrients, the functions will get impaired. So these are the various core functions. You can go through the list which is given here. It is taken from PARC only. And in absence of the particular nutrients, these core functions will get deteriorated. So let's come to the indirect measures to assess the nutritional status. What I told you before also is that in indirect measures, you're not directly assessing the nutritional status. What you are actually doing is you're taking a proxy for nutritional status. So you're measuring something else and you're using it as a proxy for nutritional status. For example, in ecological factors and assessment, you're taking a proxy of food balance sheet, socioeconomic factors, health, education services, and conditioning influences as a proxy for nutritional status. Wherever conditioning influences like parasitic, bacterial, and viral infections are there, obviously the nutritional status will not be good. Wherever health and education services are good, like primary healthcare and immunization, obviously the nutrition status will be good there, right? So you're not directly measuring the nutrition status of a person. You're indirectly getting an idea of the nutrition status by measuring these things. Okay, socioeconomic factors. If the socioeconomic factors are good, like these things, so obviously the nutrition status of the person will be good. Food balance sheet, which is per capita food supply, the total supply of food for the country divided by total population. So per head, how much food is being generated in the country? Okay, that is called food balance sheet. This is not very accurate, but anyhow, it gives you some idea about the nutritional status of a country. Vital indices is also another indirect method of assessing the nutritional status. There are two, as we all know, that there are two ways of expressing the vital indices. Those are mortality data and morbidity data. Remember, I told you that certain age groups are at risk of malnutrition. Now, these age groups are usually under 5 children and mothers. So when you find that these specific mortality rates like infant mortality rate, stillbirth rate, child mortality rate, neonatal mortality rate, percentage of low birth weight, if these indices are high in the country, it also indicates that the nutrition status is not good enough. Similarly, morbidity data, you can get this morbidity data of protein energy malnutrition, anemia, endemic goiter, xerophthalmia, vitamin deficiency, diarrhea. With this, you get an idea about the nutrition status. Why I'm telling you idea? Because again, I'm telling you that malnutrition is a iceberg phenomenon. Whatever cases of protein energy malnutrition came to your hospital, it doesn't mean that the country only has that many cases. It means the country has large number of cases beyond this. So we say that it is an indirect measure of nutritional assessment. It is not a direct measure of nutritional assessment. To conclude, these will be the questions which will be asked. Nutritional surveillance, remember the 4 aims of the nutritional surveillance and remember the cycle. It starts with identifying the problem and ends with finding out if our solutions are working or not. Enumerate the various methods for assessing the nutritional status. Remember the mnemonic A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and V. Also, don't forget to classify them into direct methods and indirect methods. The indirect methods being the ecological factors and the vital statistics. Then let's come to the anthropometric measures. Remember that there are different anthropometric measures for adults and different anthropometric measures for children. In adults, we usually use the most popular method is BMI, body mass index. It is a measure of body fat. So it is a marker for future risk of diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and hypertension. Remember what are the normal ranges, what is obesity and what is underweight. Besides body mass index, we also use certain other measures for adults, which are skin fold thickness, waist hip ratio. Similarly, in case of children, the most popular measures which we use is weight for age, height for age, weight for height. right? We are comparing them with the reference standards. And if the reference standard, and after comparison, if the found out measure is less than 2 standard deviation, then we come up with various names like stunting and wasting. Okay, other measures for children is head circumference, chest circumference, and mid-arm circumference. And about diet survey, remember that there are 3 steps. First, identify how much food is consumed by the household or the family. Second, from the food, identify what nutrients are consumed by the family. Then calculate the nutrient for a 1 consumption unit or a normal adult meal, and then find out what are the deficiencies in the nutrients which are being taken in the diet. So these are all the answers. These are all the probable questions which can be asked about assessment of nutritional status. And I hope I have cleared, I have given you some idea about how to answer them. I'll be looking forward to your feedback. And if you have any doubts, you know where to contact me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for that wonderful presentation. And students, I hope you all enjoyed the session. Please like, share, and subscribe our YouTube channel. And if you have any queries or clarification, you can just type them in the comment section, and our doctor will respond to it later on. Please stay tuned. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.